In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. Whenever I have guests come and visit the church for tours, maybe First Presbyterian Day School or a college, Wesleyan or Mercer, they come in and one of the first things that they're going to notice, of course, is our lack of seating. No, not really. It's the iconography, but it's always the lack of seating is the second thing they notice, typically that gets brought up. But they see the iconography, and of course, if you go to churches around this area, there are many, many beautiful churches in Macon. It's a very unique place. Macon, particularly if you have a chance to go and do a tour of some of the churches downtown, where they have a lot of beautiful woodwork. St. Joseph's, of course, has beautiful, it's just a very well done, and they have iconography also, or if they call it that, and statuary and various things. And we have a lot of beautiful churches, but the churches don't really have iconography. Iconography is unique to Orthodox Christianity, although lately some Anglicans and Roman Catholics have been more picking it up. It is pretty distinctly Byzantine. And so for these students, when they come, one of the first things they notice is the iconography, the color. Because besides from ornate wood carvings and various things in their communities, if they go to church, all they see is generally white walls, white, clean walls. And occasionally I remember going to a few places, actually looking, like conscientiously looking for a cross, and actually spending quite a bit of time looking just for a cross. Because there was a lack of symbolism in general in some communities. So iconography is a pretty important part of our faith, and today we come to the celebration of the Sunday of Orthodoxy, which is dedicated or called the Sunday of Orthodoxy because it is the day that iconography was restored after over 100 years of various controversies in the Byzantine Empire. There were many martyrs who died defending the rights of the churches to have icons. And there was of course, there was an imperial decree that they be taken out and burned. And so this went back and forth for about 100 years. And about 843, the official and final decree was made that indeed iconography is not only orthodox, but it is part of our dogmatic tradition. In other words, iconography is not a simple opinion that it's okay to have them and it's okay to venerate them, icons, but in particular that it's part of our Christianity. There isn't a Christian, an Orthodox Christian. Iconography is part of us. It's part of the faith. It's a confession it's part of the confession of faith, we should say. And you might think that would be strange. Think about it. We understand the other ecumenical councils. One dealt with who Jesus was. Another talked about, who Jesus was in terms of Mary, when there was an argument about what to call Mary. Some dealt with the nature of who Christ is. And then you wonder, icons are nice and they're pretty, but what does that have to do with anything? Why would I say that would be part of the dogmatic tradition, or somehow that Christianity, when I say it's part of the dogmatic tradition, I'm saying that Christianity has iconography. And without iconography, it is less than Christianity. It is part of the very fabric. Now, why would they argue over something like that? Well, historically, we know from the biblical times that there's always been a fight between the apostles and the church, between Gnosticism and a dualism, which is, when I say dualism, I mean the opposition of spirit and matter. Spirit-matter dualism was something the Apostle John wrote about when he talked to those who said, if you do not believe that Christ came in the flesh, actually became in the flesh, then you are of the Antichrist. That was a dogmatic proposition. If you don't believe Jesus became a human being, God became man, then you are not a Christian, very basically, and you're of the Antichrist. He was opposing a group that wanted to say that, of course, spirit and matter cannot be together. In Platonic philosophy and also in Greek philosophy, this is the height of things that are irreconcilable. Spirit and matter cannot be meshed together. And so they wanted to say that Jesus was, number one, a spirit, which would be the case of Docetism, which said that he came in appearance only, but he really wasn't physical. He didn't have real materiality. Or in many other forms of Gnosticism that essentially denied the incarnation. The main point, again, the fundamental point being that spirit and matter are opposed to each other and cannot complement each other. So we have that in our own society, this opposition between, in our secular society and in the Christian faith in the U.S., the general confessional Protestantism, there is an opposition between spirit and matter. And some people are very offended by the presence of iconography in our parishes and would accuse us of worshiping them, of worshiping wood. Because of this, because there's no understanding. Now, it's okay to pray to God. It's okay to do things that in many ways are ethereal, like read the Bible, because the Bible is words in our heads, and it teaches us, and we're educated and we grow, and prayers are words that we offer to God, and we can read them. But where it breaks down is this frustration with the Orthodox that we would have any sort of physical thing that we would pay honor to. Especially, no one minds decorations. What they mind is the kissing, the paying honor to matter. They mind, in many communities that we're surrounded with, they mind the idea of sacraments. The idea that physical material can carry the grace of God. Why would we receive communion when you can commune with God by saying a simple prayer? Why would you be anointed with oil when all you need is a prayer? Again, a prayer being an ethereal thing, something I offer, words. The opposition is to the physicality of the Christian faith, and in fact, Orthodoxy is radically a physical faith. And this is because of our sacramental mentality, what we believe about the world. You see, when Adam was created, when Adam and Eve were created, Adam and Eve formed by God, uniting the heavenly, the spiritual world with the physical world, and be given to be priests and prophets over all creation, because they were the only ones that united the spiritual and the physical. And in that way, when they went out and they lived, life was sacramental. Now, what do I mean by sacramental? Sacramental essentially means that life is also very symbolic. The Christian, the typical traditional Christian way of looking at reality is sacramental and symbolic. In other words, in our secular, to contrast it, in our secular mindset, everything is very dry. A person is just a person. Animals are just animals. Things are just what they are in the physical. There's nothing beyond there. They don't call to any sort of eternal truth. The one way to put it is to explain the word symbol is to say that symbols are intimately bound up with the visible material. They invest the visible material with a meaning that transcends them. Everything that we encounter physically is meant to draw us into a transcendent reality. If you can think of some of the old countries that struggle with superstition, superstition is the negative side of a sacramental mentality, but it is seeing beyond what is just happening on this plane of reality and looking for more. It is seeing and looking for the symbols and signs in our life. It is being willing to look past the bread and the wine in order to partake of it as the transcendent communion with Jesus Christ, to receive his body and blood. And it's hard to even talk about from my point of view and from our point of view, because we are surrounded with a society that this is absolutely not part of the ethos. And so it sounds like I'm describing a foreign world in some ways. So the iconography that we have is meant to call us to something beyond. I'm going to read something that ultimately carried the council. It's from St. John Damascus. He says, "I do not worship matter, but I worship the creator of matter, who for my sake has become material, who has been pleased to dwell in matter and has through matter effected my salvation. I shall not cease to venerate matter, for it was through matter that my salvation came to pass. Do not insult matter, for it is in no way despicable. Nothing is despicable that God has filled with his divine grace." Just to go into this a little more theologically, we can remember some important points. In the Garden of Eden, back to the garden, Adam and Eve were created, it said, according to the image of God. According to the image. In Colossians, it says that Jesus Christ is the image of God. One of the reasons we venerate icons, one of the reasons they're so part of the faith, is because we ourselves are made according to the image. And we ourselves, because we are made according to the image, also fashion images. We fashion images that are also called to something beyond ourselves, because as you meet people in your life, you don't just meet people, you're also called to meet Christ. I mean, we've said this in a few of the Gospels in prior weeks, that that we're supposed to see Christ in other people because they're made according to the image. But it is in that very act that we also make images like God, and that those images call to something deeper. And so Christ is the image of the invisible God, and yet somehow we can encounter him in material. In seminary, I was surprised to hear that one of the professors say that we are radical materialists. And so it is so much a part of our faith, and I guess what we should really pray for and to hope to come to some understanding is to get away from the Western notion of decor, of simple iconography as decoration, to get away from this idea of any sort of superstitious ideas, of course, but to find the middle path. To find the middle path where we're actually trying to view reality, where we can see reality in a mysterious and sacramental and symbolic light. This would transform our lives in so many ways. And this is why the fathers of that particular council fought so hard to preserve iconography in our churches, because it preserves an ethos that I would say is hard for us to access in our community, in our world, an ethos that is hard to understand. But it is the ethos that when we encounter material, that within that material we can encounter God, and that material itself. And I can even think of the few testimonies I've heard. For instance, the iconographer we had here who said part of their conversion was an icon of Jesus Christ. That as he stood before it, he felt like he should talk to it, and as he talked to it, he encountered Jesus Christ. I can think of, and this is a secondhand story, of Father Roman Braga, who, when he left the prison camps and where he was stationed, kissed his bed because it was on his bed that he found Christ. I can think of Nikolai Azichu, who wished he could have 5 more minutes in Dachau, because it was in that cell he found Christ. And so in these icons and in all these things that people venerate and kiss, they're kissing hopefully because they've encountered God, they've encountered something divine. They've encountered Christ. And this is fundamentally a part of our faith. It cannot be separated. May God bless us to encounter Christ in His icon, to encounter Christ in other people, and to embrace our faith more fully, and to somehow be able to put on the lenses, the goggles that will help us to see life as a mystery of symbol and sacrament. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Christ is in our midst.